Yeah. No, it's fine. I can give you a few minutes to try to.
No, we can roll. We're ready to move on.
We can roll out.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, now.
I'm saying work to be done. Let's get rolling.
Shangu, sorry, Baba.
Hello.
Shangu, right, but it's all right. Okay. No.
So we're ready to go.
Yeah. It's connecting. Good morning, South African that we're going to come to talk about very pressing and important that concerns African leadership. We one of the beautiful my brother, Mr. Buyani Zwane, the economist.
Yep.
He touched very important sectors and very key issues, on how to build good private sector with the government institutions, take the growth of the economy of African policies to be looked into and adjusted so that as African countries we can be able to trade amongst each other. We can have skills exchange. So we had a very powerful session yesterday, and we welcome Mr. Buyani Zwane through development.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Good morning. So, and I'd like to believe we've got Shane was standing by.
Yes. I will hand over, take us through.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Zwane, briefly, I'll just try and come up with the context for our question.
Yep.
You can within it or you go beyond, it's fine. I just want to create a picture for our viewers so that we are together.
Okay.
Of course, leadership is an important aspect of our leadership, cuts across all institutions from domestic and financial. Without leadership, institutions will not be able to stand. So important for us to come into conversation and somebody find themselves panicking with uncertainty to the future. Have a conversation to see what leadership models, principles, maybe policy adoptions can stability now and beyond COVID-19.
Most important for us to appreciate, we are connected on a that many people should really be marking as critical for the future, as to future generations as it were.
Probably the
Souls? There seems to be something coming through from Souls. What's up? Souls?
Not too sure if you can hear you though.
I can hear. It also is important for us to be able to think about the fact that it is 2 days after we were marking and celebrating, commemorating Africa Day. And being Africa Wisdom, Bulungo, it's good to be able to connect with you from that base and with an appreciation of what wisdom we can glean and share amongst ourselves in the continent. And what I'll be wanting to be able to do is to use this time to just reinforce the importance of leadership. Very often, when we look into what comes through to us called crisis, somehow we may very well find ourselves floundering, we may find ourselves chasing after shadows, we may find ourselves threatened, as it were, by what's presented through to us. When in fact it should not. We should be finding ourselves in a situation where we are desirous of more and more things coming our way in a manner that reveals the best that is inside of us. In fact, terminology that stands out is one that says, crises reveal leaders. They do not in any way get to be the things that managers get to live with. Crisis, much like power, reveals what's inside of you. So when we look into what COVID-19 has presented through to us, and we're seeking to be able to have a conversation that talks to the emancipation of Africa, an emancipation of everyone else, but more importantly, the cradle of humankind, which is us right here in Africa. It is important to be able to find ourselves well equipped with leadership competencies that will stand us in good stead as we navigate what goes into the future. Somehow I get to be able to be reminded as to what transpired when Kwame Nkrumah conceived, together with a whole lot of other leaders way back in the 1950s, what should make Africa a united Africa, the organization of African unity. When that was put together, amongst the statements that were presented, as it were, by Buyani Zwane, was that we shall see and measure our progress as a continent by the improvement in the health of our people. When we've got so many who are not feeling healthy right now, and COVID has presented a threat to them in the area of how systems are functioning or not functioning, it presents through to us the necessity to be able to revisit our health systems. He then said, Africa will be measured by the number of children in schools. Right now, the schools are not operating. He then said it's going to be by the quality of their education. Not so much the schooling, but the education that they have. By the availability of water and electricity in our towns and villages. And by the happiness which our people take in being able to manage their own affairs. Emancipation is beyond just politics. Emancipation is holistic. And I want to be able to just re-emphasize that as human beings are four-dimensional in terms of being body, heart, mind, and spirit, it is also important for us to be able to take into cognizance that humanity operates within a context. The context that I have chosen to be able to coin as being step-led. And I would want you to be able to look into the acrostic of step-led and leadership playing its part in terms of that. So as we're looking into the emancipation of Africa, we need to be able to pay attention to, S stands for the social aspects. Is our social environment looking much better now in 2020 than it was a good 70 years ago when the OAU was conceived. Is it possible for us to be able to look into the next level, the T, which has to do with technology? Virtually everybody is saying something or connecting to something that has to do with the Industrial Revolution. But what about the Fourth Industrial Revolution is something that we are taking into cognizance on a daily basis, so that we are deliberate in looking into how we work for us. As it is right now, we are engaging with you located out in Middelburg and Steve Chwete Municipality, and I am in Gauteng in Ekurhuleni. There is a big, and yet we've been drawn closer because of technology. The E in step-led has to do with ecology. And much is happening in terms of environmental matters that have worse, unfortunately, with the transition from the second to the third industrial revolution. The atmosphere is heavily polluted. We're finding ourselves with a whole lot of mine dumps that are presenting circumstances that are really sore to the eye. When you drive through, as it were, coming through from Joburg, heading out to where you are, if I can, I begin to be able to see the mountains that are there because of the mining activity that is taking place in order to be able to bring fossil fuel powered, as it were, power stations. And that in itself is affecting our settings badly. But while you're looking into that, you look into what's happening to waters, the river that go out right where you are in Mpumalanga. And then, as we look into that, we need to look into the P, which obviously speaks to the politics of the country, the politics of the continent. And we need to be deliberate about paying attention to what those are in terms of how they are affecting the way we move around. Developed economies in the world have economics dictating politics. But because we're a developing economy, politics dictate what goes in the economy, which is why we are operating in South Africa, among others, with BBBEE, broad-based black economic empowerment, which is driven from politics to reorientate what goes on in economics. So let's move on to the L in terms of lead. That's legalistic. Legislation that we've got in Africa largely from Roman Dutch, which means we are still being taken through by what Romans put together when they were extending the empire as wide as could, from a colony that covered much of the empire and much of what we have as Rome. And all of those were coming through and providing legislation that is still in what goes on now, more than 2,000 years after the Roman Empire was put in place. And of course, that element comes through because way back since 1652, had Dutch influence into Africa, as it were. So the legislation that we've got, even as we look into our beautiful constitution that is par excellence, the best influences that are coming through from Roman Dutch, as it were. The next thing to be able to look into is obviously the economics. We are operating at a time right now where virtually all economies are hemorrhaging. We've been speaking about the fact that South Africa has been on junk status for an extended period of time based on the rating agencies that have come through and articulated how they see ease of trading and how the finances can be flowing and there could be direct inflows and internal inflows, as it were, that keep the economy going. That aspect becomes extremely critical when you begin to appreciate that since about March of this year, when the lockdown was declared, well over 1 million jobs have been lost. We're living in an environment where somewhere between 100 and 250,000 businesses have actually folded. They're folded largely because they cannot cope and they were not prepared for the challenges that lie right before us. Among other things, we have had many of the essentials being the center and the core of our business. More of us in South Africa and much of Africa is in a consumer state. We're not so much into manufacturing and producing. We need to wake up to the fact that agriculture is the stuff that keeps countries alive. We're beginning to appreciate that manufacturing for ourselves is what we ought to have been working on. When you care to think about it, we are struggling to be able to have personal protective equipment manufactured locally. We are needing to be able to have things couried, brought through by planes from China all over, because we have not been looking into the right economic indicators and vitals that would keep our country in the state that it needs to be. So we need to be able to look into the economy, and as we look into it, we actually need to be able to associate that with the blood, the flow of the blood in a human body. When the economy works, the whole country works. And of course, we've got different economies, as it were. There is the first world economy, and there is a third world economy operating side by side. Right here in Joburg, where we are located, we've stated many, many times that you just have the freeway separating the wealthy from the not so wealthy. And that in itself presents challenges when we're still being told to do social distancing. Those social distancing become almost luxury to those township environment in informal settlements, and as cold as it is today, it makes it even more difficult to be able to look into the economy in a manner that grows the economy. So we find ourselves almost confined into becoming consumers instead of producers. The D in step-led is demography. And this is something that I've found necessary to be able to bring through those who are engaging with us from all over the world. That when we do not pay attention to the demographical locations in our own country, we find that we are not utilizing the talent available to us that we should use to apply and employ very, very well. What I mean by this, I work with an organization called No Ordinary Corporation, located in Ekurhuleni. And amongst the things that we've been sharing with businesses since the beginning of the year, in fact, towards the fact that we are operating where in 2020, we've got a minimum of 5 generations working or relating side by side. Those 5 generations, if you were to be able to look into it, date way back to 1929 up to date. And when you look into 1929 to about 1945, you have what is called the traditionalists. And these are people that were instrumental, as it were, in terms of ushering in what we now refer to as the African Union and the Organization of African Unity as it was when it was put together. And then you've got the baby boomers who came through from 1946 to 1964. And these are very interesting people because they are the visionaries that have helped us to be able to look into the future and say, I can see the future is possible. In fact, I have been to the mountaintop and I have visualized what the Canaan land is going to look like. Having got that, we then have a generation that flows after that, which we refer to as the X generation. And these are people who were born between the 1965 and 1975. And when you look into that period, 1965 to 1980, when you look into that generation, it's a generation that grows up in an environment where technology has been full. Computers are available. And therefore, they're beginning to be able to utilize technology in order to be able to define the future, as it were. They get to be highly entrepreneurial, and they get to be the people who question the amount of time that is spent at work vis-a-vis to family. But at the same time, it's the same generation that gets to be able to have mother and father at work, which means the children are actually being raised up by someone other than the parents themselves. So the outsourcing almost began with that generation. And then, of course, comes the Y generation, often referred to as the millennials. And when you reflect into what goes on with the millennials, rising up in an environment where status quo is being questioned all the time. Among others, of course, is that we are growing in an environment where you, again, getting a new wave of entrepreneurship, as it were, where you're getting the birth of, among others, the Facebooks of this world. You're beginning to appreciate the impact of 120 characters in Twitter, shifting the thinking around the world. You're beginning to find the goodness, as it were, that comes out of camera and curating of things with Instagram. And all of those things are beginning to bring through to us the importance of relationships. Now, if we're to be able to let the emancipation of Africa become the way we really get to be able to see the beauty that is possible, it's going to be when we get the generation referred to as the Z gens coming through from 2000 to date as core to the success, because they are the ones who are not only connected, but they are people who are creative, curating, and among others, ensuring that community is the stuff that they require. In fact, it is the Z gens that are beginning to challenge us around how we look after environment. Now, when you look into all five of these generations, what is core is going to be principles. Leadership in the 21st century that is going to take us to where we need to be able to get to has got to be a principle-centered leadership. And I want us to be able to spend the time that we're going to have interfacing and talking, discussing, as it were, around for you, Africa.
Mr. Zwane, I just want to read it was a mouthful and then create context for our interaction together.
Yes.
Of course, what comes strongly to our comprehensive consider when they built up their leadership structure, and also when they imagine how their organizations can be built. And of course, you've almost touched on everything.
Yep.
So part of things that I'm thinking about as you are engaging me is how change is inevitable and how leadership should basically be a change driver towards attaining a stable living standard for all, or in fact for most of the people within the vicinity of that leadership.
Sure.
So I want to acknowledge that change is not an accident. It is a norm of life. And as such, we need leaders and leadership institutions to drive that change towards a desired end. Africa, for the longest time, Mr. Zwane would agree with me, has seemingly been a domain of coincidence. You know, we face things that we have not anticipated. We live in realities that we have not taken an initiative to create them. I love how we ended off in leadership that will thrive is leadership that is principle-based. This behind the context of you going through all generations to say you understand the dynamics, the transitions, and the evolutions of different generations.
Sure.
But principle to that as we administrate, we need to focus on principle. So I want you to take us through what principles are those and how do we perhaps administrate them in these various generations and diverse industries.
Thank you very much. Core to this is for us to be able to understand what we mean by principle. And principle is pretty much the same root word we use in terms of radical, which has to do with the roots. the deepest root, as it were, that keeps the tree standing. Even when the winds are blowing hard, it is able to stand. For that to be able to work, there is a necessity to look into, among others, the very notion that we are body, heart, mind, and spirit requires of us to be able to look into what about body, heart, mind, and spirit are the things we need to be able to take into cognizance. The first principle is around the fact that we are spirit before we are physical. And because we are spirit before we are physical, we get to be able to speak about leadership that is influential when they inspire us, which means they take our spirit along with them. And that's the thing that we often do not pay as much attention as we ought to. So that inspiration comes through because central to inspiration is legacy. Our ability to be able to deliberately work towards that which will outlive us. So the core principle of spirit is that we'll outlive the physical body. We were spirit before we came in here. We shall be spirit after we've left this human formation. That is a critical thing to be able to look into. My friend John C. Maxwell says leadership is influence. And it means in the structure of an organization, you still can inspire others to their greatness, and in the process help them to be able to start thinking about what legacy they can leave behind. The next thing to be able to look in. Yes.
So sorry to disturb you there. I think that's a very important point, especially for Africans.
Yes.
The issue of influence. Most of African people, the mentality of either looking to heaven or looking to the government, looking to parents, or looking to businesses around.
Sure.
And we seldom take an initiative to influence ourselves, let alone the other person. So I'd want you to delve deeper there to say leadership is influence. Take action where you are. Please take us even further.
If I am to be able to consider the fact that it is not always my generational growth environment that determines how far I will go. I may very well be raised up in a constrained environment, but when I know that I have the eagle spirit inside of me, when the storms come, I will be able to sail into the storms, spread my wings, and give the best of me. Now, you're right. Many of us in Africa have a tendency to be able to look up to the heavens as the solutions will come there, when in fact, heaven is inside of us. You see, when we pray what we consider to be the Lord's Prayer, we say, let your kingdom come, and let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Guess what? Our being right here on earth was God's will. And therefore, we needed to be able to honor him, as it were, by becoming the best that we are capable of. Now, so many of us who have not really given ourselves time to contemplate and think through what possibilities are there to be able to shift our environments to a point where we can truly be the change agents and catalysts, require a hand holding. We require a mentor. We require a coach, which is why the five generations that I've listed become extremely important. Without a clear reference, as it were, to the generations that will be there and people who have gone before us, it is going to be easy for us to find ourselves constrained by circumstances and defined by circumstances instead of releasing what is lying inside of us that we're capable of. Here's the thing. Inside every seed, there is a tree. Do not get to know the tree until the seed is buried in the soil and it comes out of the soil. COVID-19 incident gives us this chance to be able to get the seed seed of greatness that's inside of us to actually feel what it is like that goes on for a good 60 days and then emerge and stronger. It's important for us to look into that. So at a personal level, self-leadership requires you and I to be able to be deliberate in terms of searching for ways of looking at people who have gone before us, who have scaled different difficult times. The traditionalists, for instance, went through the depression of the 1930s. So they know what it is like to live with little. The baby boomers went through the wars, and including, among others, what happened for us in our country in 1953. We got to have the introduction of Bantu education. And that was the thing that almost confirmed the history and the trajectory of the African becoming more of a worker, not a creator of work. Created in an African the search for a job instead of releasing the gift that is inside each and every one of us. You see, we were designed not so much for a job. We were designed to be purpose creators, purpose generators, as it were. And when we are operating on purpose, the way we do things is bound to be different because we will push aside the things that detract us from realizing that what we're supposed to do. So if you were to be able to take about that radical, take yourself to the desert and you find a tree in the desert, you will find that it has the deepest root because it has to go much deeper to be able to find some water. For us to be able to lead and lead well in this time is not really about searching for stability, but it is for searching for sustainability. That which will outlive us, that which will build other nations around us, that which will build communities deeper. Happy with that?
Maybe right there, Mr. Zwane, sticking. I'm still here. I'm sticking with that conversation of
yes, I just need to sort out
relatedness and the integration of nations and communities as it would be.
Yes. Sorry, I just needed to connect my power.
To the formula of step lead. I like that formula very well, very much rather. I want to go back to how about your step-led acronym is, and how it touches on various sects, and maybe I want us to have slowly this conversation, because I think it's important for Africans to understand the global systems as to how is the world administrated, how is it coordinated. Sure. One of the things that you lament, besides the generational gap, is and what consequently they become prepared for behind the back of the experience that elders have. Sure. And you emphasize and encourage that everyone must find a mentor, must have an elder. Of course, that is keeping to a Nguni proverb that says "Inje Pambi."
Absolutely.
And that is important. Those are important sentiments, teachings that are readily available within our community.
Yep.
But with the introduction, of course, as you said, of administration, you speak about how Bantu education had a focus. Maybe for your consideration as you answer, how capitalism has disciplined sects of knowledge. You speak about demographics, you speak about politics, you speak about legislation, you speak about economics. Those are disciplines that are found in the system that are keeping to the economic system, the administrative. Yeah. And I think part of our challenges as Africans is the lack of integration. As you say, we do not come with things from scratch and build them comprehensively. We just want to be one-hit wonders, microwaved success. Yep. So maybe just with this time, please explain to us how we can integrate all these beautiful sects that you've spoken about from step-led. How do we bring them together in ensuring that we establish not only a strong leadership, as you said, but a leadership that is sustainable and integrated.
Thank you very much. How we do that is we move from spirit to mind. The mind is what defines what gets to be done or not done. We are what we repeatedly think about. In fact, James Allen put it this way: as a man thinketh, so is. And many people have used that, but have forgotten something that came through from Solomon. Many Solomon says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Which then says there is a necessity for us to be able to connect two things: the mental aspect as well as the heart. Those two are put together. You will find something different happening even in the workplace and happening in the school environment. And I've then moved those as you look into the interplay of the mind and the heart. It brings us to the source before. It has to do with lead as core to leadership. The first thing that's in there, if we are going to be able to be integrated in approach, is love. If we do not love ourselves, we do not love our neighbor, we do not love our family, we do not love our society, we do not love our community, we do not love the country, we do not love the continent, the things we're going to be able to do are going to be things of greed, satisfaction, and in fact going into the point you just raised in terms of microwave everything. Integrated education, for instance, will take into account what is the societal, social standing of the children that are in my classroom right now. How are they interacting with technology? What is the environment they come from looking like? And therefore, in the putting together of the lessons that are going to be there to be able to grow and groom the people that are in my classroom, I want to be able to make sure that I have considered that I will help them to interact with the environment better as a result of having been my students. It then becomes possible for them to start looking into the politics that tends to see its show before time for elections, as it were. We actually get to be able to hold politicians accountable to ourselves. We then get to be able to look into questioning even the legislation that is put in place. For argument, and utilizing the basic education has a lot to do with the perpetuation of that which was laid out by Verwoerd way back in the fortunate that we are now in 2020, but with the mindset that was about preparing the African person for someone else to give them work, not for an African person to be a creator of their own destiny. Many of us got to be inspired, as it were, when we watched Invictus, which is a movie that displays a story of Nelson Mandela out in prison. And we were taken up, as it were, about how he used to be able to read this poem that spoke to him as being the captain of his own destiny. That he could be able to look into his future in his own head, even when it was dark and it looked like there would never be freedom at all. He kept on the cause of the knowledge that there will be a day when we will be a free nation. Now, of course, there are a lot of conspiracy theories that have come after that. It's important to be able to look into that. So educators who are not preparing people who are only going to be in a job are going to be uncomfortable with a curriculum that reduces the people into becoming resources. This is a very crazy language that we have. We look into technology as capital. We look into money as capital. And then we look at people as resources. Now, what on earth is that? We say that we can use them when we want them and we can dispose of them when we don't want them anymore. That language is a language that prepares humanity to be used and using one another, which is not the right thing to do. If I am going to be able to apply the notion of I love, I will look after others and seek to be able to get them to grow to the best they are capable of. I will create an environment within which they will question even the approaches that I use. And I do not say to, I am the authority, therefore you shall go as I say, shall do as I say. No, no, no. I actually want to be able to present challenges and problems in a manner that makes them to be able to even question my orientation and my approaches to them. It's important for us to be able to do that. But that requires mental maturity. Unfortunately, many who are in the education space do not have the mental maturity to be able to welcome questions and challenges from young who are interacting in the way that they should be applied, as it were. So there is a necessity for deliberate about creating the connections, social, technology, and we need to be able to make sure that as we engage in all things we do are things that bring us to the greatness we are capable of. It would appear that unless we are operating from a position of greatness and pursuing greatness, it is going to be difficult to keep the life and the lives and livelihoods of those around us where they should be. We're still together?
No, I'm still here, Mr. Zwane. Maybe one more question before we give the souls. Book that I wrote, A Search for My Africa, and I want us to discuss this book in depth.
Yeah.
This conversation is cracking up a lot.
Wonderful.
But one more question. It's a trying times for different leaders, political leaders, religious leaders, churches have been suspended, business leaders as well.
No, attending church has been suspended. Attending church.
Come again?
Attending church
yes.
in a structure has been suspended. Church will never be suspended.
Of course, definitely. It's the theology of things. I was being political about my statement.
Okay, at least we're clear about that. Yeah.
With those circumstances facing a lot of South African people, and in the globe,
yes.
I know you are a great inspirational speaker. Just take 2 minutes to encourage some of your colleagues and encourage them about where we are and where we are going to possibly land.
Care to think about the fact that the continent we're living in is a cradle of humankind. All of the leaders that we get to be able to celebrate and even check out in historical books, which the Bible is, we get to be able to find those leaders having had origins in Africa. This is the continent wherein Moses, who got to be able to help and bring about freedom for many, got to be able to do the things that he did. Joseph, that gets to be celebrated. We talk about 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. That happened in Africa. Joshua was born in Africa and got to be able to release people, as it were, over from the desert journey of 40 years and cross over the River Jordan to be able to get to the other side. Africa has had and has brought leadership that has shaped the world, as it were. In fact, when you travel around Europe, you get to be able to appreciate that it is Africans who ruled Europe before the light-skinned people got to be able to rule Europe. In fact, when you care to think about it, even the Napoleons of this world got their direction from Africa. Not so long ago, there was a clear historical and archaeological revelation that spoke to the fact that America, before Christopher Columbus got there, was led by Africans who actually were trading in Europe and trading in America and connecting what we refer to now as West Africa, Liberia, Ghana, Nigeria. All of those were trading with the Americas. You've got the people that are so fair and exciting, as it were, in Brazil. Many of those Brazilians have their roots in Africa. So if you care to think about it, we've had many leaders, many people who have given direction to the world coming from Africa. And therefore, there is no need for an African to feel less than, to see themselves as less than. All who have come through and become better did that when they connected with Africa. King Solomon, for instance, got to be able to see the goodness of what he could do when the Queen of Sheba came all the way from Ethiopia with all of the wealth, as it were, that she had, and she brought it over through to King Solomon. The temple, as it was put together, was adorned with what came from Africa. So Africa has had great leadership, and Africa will continue to have great leadership for as long as we move ourselves from being servants of others to serving the nation. You see, when I serve my neighbor, they can notice and watch what is behind my serving them. Is it out of selfish objective, selfish drive, or it is genuinely out of I care about you? So I would like to be able to just challenge us as Africans in South Africa to be able to appreciate that we are well located in the continent, right at the base of the continent, so as to be able to hold up the whole continent. We have the capacity to be able to bring to many the knowledge and wisdom of old that has been forgotten. We often make reference to you are because I am, and I am because you are. We look into that and we look into our hand and we say it is only strong when it is clenched as a fist. It is when we are united that we are stronger than when we are separate. Any person who is out there feeling distracted, concerned, dismayed by what's going on right now, I'd like for you to be able to note crisis is opportunity riding the danger of the wind. And if you are going to be able to adopt that which makes Africa, Africa, adopt the eagle mentality. When the storms come, head straight into the eye of the storm. This is an opportunity. For the last 62 days, we've had the opportunity to form new habits, establish those habits. By tomorrow, it's day 63. 63 is when you consolidate whatever habits you have put together. Anything that you've continuously done for 63 days becomes you. Now, is that something you can pass on to your children? Because you will be outlived by your children. Is that something that you can pass on to the neighbors around you? Because when you are no more, someone will be giving a tribute. That tribute statement will flow out of what you contributed into their lives. We can do it because we are born of greatness. Africa is a great continent. We just do not appreciate what we have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zwane. That was inspiring. Let's hear Saul's if he has any questions for us, and let him give us direction as a host.
We're waiting on you. We still have you.
Can you hear us?
It looks like the
Okay.
something has moved out there.
Disappeared.
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome back, sir. Are you with us? Your mic is on mute. Can you open your mic when it's on mute?
Thank you. Unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Yes. No, actually, I was checking through my comments. No comments, no questions yet, or comments yet. But Zwane has spoken the mouth. Actually, has pieced through all the confusion and the questions which are there, because somebody is standing there at the corner and he's asking himself, I've been pushing my way up, and I've been using proper channels,
yes.
But the people I'm going to, they're not accountable, and they can't kind of assist me. Big government institutions and be whatsoever, and you're able to cover that with at the end of the day, as people and as entrepreneurs, we must develop leadership skills, and we must be able to lead by example. Lead from behind and lead from the front. Zwane, you've done so much. I'm inspired and with your presentation.
Thank you. But I think it's important just to point something else to you, souls. When we say lead by example, we need to be deliberate about what kind of example. Because bad examples are examples. We've got a whole lot of tsotsis out there, hooligans, who are exemplifying things, and the youth who do not have good mentorship end up in a space where they are following people they should not really be following. It is important for us to be able to consider what is it that we are modeling to the young people out there. If we are not modeling stuff that we would be able to let our own children see us do, it means we're actually not on the right track. So, as much as many of us would use the statement, lead by example, we need to question what kind of example. In fact, there's a story that says, who are you able to lead? And then, who in their right minds would follow you? And then the third question is, would you follow you? In a space of leadership, when you're finding yourself in a position where you cannot follow you, then clearly is a problem. And when you're saying who in their right minds would follow you, and you're not able to come with an answer that is convincing, then clearly you rely on people not being their true selves to be able to follow you, which means you want to hoodwink people. You want people to be able to really mindlessly follow you. Oh, by the way, Africa, we spoke to the body, heart, mind, and spirit, and we really covered spirit, mind, and heart. We did not go to the body, which has to do with the economy. And I want us to be able to just wrap the conversation by touching into the issues of body. When we do not look after our body, which carries us from point A to point Z, we are going to be in trouble, because people see the physical manifestation when they look at our body. It is important for you to be able to think, am I portraying the best that is in me with the way that I look? And I'm not really looking at presenting us to be able to get to be kind of like flimsy in the way we do things, and we just do things for appearance's sake. But it is important for us to be able to look into, if I do not look after myself, my body will go to pot and it will not carry me. I need to be able to think about, how often do I actually exercise? You know, you can say to yourself, well, the gyms are closed, but that thing stops you from going for a walk. Africans have always been able to exercise themselves. They've always been able to take charge of circumstances. They've always traveled distances. You spoke to some of our Nguni idioms. Indlela ibuzo ngoba phambili. Why? Because somebody is on a path. If they're not on any path, they won't be asking indlela. Okay? It's important to be able to look into that. Second, we are so busy being busy that we do not give ourselves time to rest. The body needs rest. Now, at a philosophical level, what COVID-19 has done has been to get Africa and the globe to go for repairs. So physically, the physical environment is getting a chance to breathe. There is less pollutants in the atmosphere. The water is becoming clearer because we're not as crazy active as we've always been, which means the interchange of carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide and oxygen and all of those, they've had an opportunity to be revisited. We need to do the same thing in terms of our own bodies, looking after our bodies, giving our bodies rest. With technology, we get to be so busy being busy right into the middle of the night because these things are stimulating us. But should we be driven by technology? Should we be driven by things around us? And in fact, does work and job mean sacrificing relationships? We cannot and we should not. So at a physical level, what you'll find, you probably have noticed this wisdom. When you are in the world and you are exercising, somehow your heart beats higher than normal, which means the flow of oxygen in the body is improved. But what you also find is that you get a chance to think and think differently. And you think some of the problems that you were facing while you are jogging, while you are running. And by the time you get back home, you're able to solve the problems that are there. And somehow, usually, while you're doing the jogging, the exercising, and all of that, your spirit is lifted. So it is the integratedness of body, heart, mind, and spirit that makes us whole. And we need to be able to embrace that as the people of this country. I want to wrap this. 1994, we got political emancipation. Today, we're talking about the importance of economic emancipation. Economic emancipation is not going to happen if our minds have not changed. If our minds are still about being servants of others, of being laborers. In fact, we even have a Department of Labor, which is not really about emphasizing the creativity of humanity. It is important for us to be able to look into the emancipation. And I had an opportunity this morning to be able to just look into the good book and appreciate that Moses had the responsibility of moving people out of Egypt through the desert. But before that, he took them through the ocean. The ocean we've been through in our country has been legislated apartheid and colonialism that had been on for many years. 1994 gave us the opportunity of the parting of the waters of the Red Sea for us to be able to walk through. We were on all of those zigzags, as it were, in order to be able to cross over to the other side. But what we did not pay attention to was that we allowed those who were oppressors to be able to go into the other side alongside ourselves. there is a necessity for us to free ourselves on the other side. As we look into the last 26 years of political emancipation, it has given us a chance to look into a generation that knows what it's like to not have legislated unfair discrimination. This generation needs to be able to carve for itself a life of freedom, which a Joshua brings. We need to be able to get to the River Jordan. And as we get to the River Jordan, pick up the stones right there that will represent and help us to be able to think through what was it that we had that required us to be able to acknowledge the source of freedom and provision in the desert as we go into the world that we are going to shape ourselves. You see, on the other side of the Jordan, you actually have people settling down, working gardens, building stuff, so they're not in tents anymore. We are now in that stage as South Africa and as Africa.
Amazing. I'm lost for words, Manget. Truly, your heart and your words are of one who's wise. I know that in the heart of souls, as they organize this conversation, is that they want to be able to draft out programs,
yes,
so that they can move beyond speaking. That is also my heart, that we can speak and speak and speak, but what's important is what we leave done, so that our words become manifest, as you say, that ultimately is what happens with the body. So because it's not here, I'm going to put on a challenge for you.
Sure.
I'm more than willing to partake in this. We need to have a conversation transgenerationally.
Yep.
And with the wisdom that you have in this kind of conversation, I'm fired up. I'm ignited as well.
Thank you.
So I'd like to invite you to commit in this platform, so
sure,
that should you go back, we can have you all held accountable. Then, at least post-COVID, part of the things, because we have had this leadership conversation, and part of the things that we have consistently spoken about is the importance of young people being brought up, the transition even in governance, the transition in education, and the need for us to rethink and, most significantly, prepare young people for the takeover of what is left from what the old people have done.
Yeah.
So this is an invitation from me, Mamangete, that post-COVID, let's have these conversations with young people, having an opportunity to see you, to ask you questions, but most importantly, to get the wisdom impartation from having you in their presence.
Sure.
Because some other things you can teach, but some other things you must actually catch. Because as you say, we are spiritual people. So can we organize that maybe post-COVID to say this conversation was genuine? We are not just conversating because we are bored and this is the only platform that's there. But
sure,
we are truly dedicated and committed to the things that we say and the things that we think.
Sure. Mshengo, I think that we need to just correct our terminology in here. There is never going to be a post-COVID. It's going to be post-lockdown. Because COVID is going to be with us. The coronaviruses have been there even at the time when HIV was introduced into the world. Coronaviruses are of various strengths, so they're there. So effectively, when we get into lockdown level 1, we are going to be able to have the freedom to interact a whole lot more. I'd like to be able to challenge you, Mshengo, to be able to, and I received the challenge you've given through to me. I'd like for you to be able to notice that in 8 days' time, we will have been on lockdown for 70 days. There is a spiritual connection to the number 70. And I would love for us to be able to look into what happens 8 days from now. When we are engaging the following Thursday, as it were, what is it that we would have done differently as the persons who have been on screen with one another? But 70 has the jubilee that we needing to be able to speak to. And if we can take ourselves around that, mark it uniquely and distinctively, we are bound to be able to create something that will make future generations thank us for having found 2020 a year of foresight and not just hindsight.
Wow. Profound, Baba. No, thank you so much for having joined us. I think we need to both log off, and then when Souls has managed to sort his device issues, I'm sure we'll have the broadcast up on social media.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of this engagement with you. I look forward to great things. All the best. Thank you, Mchana.
Thank you, Magete.
Pleasure.
Have a great one as well.
Have a superb day. Ciao.